Rosé from BLACKPINK has abandonment anxiety issues as seen in her hands, as well as the great potential for self-sabotage. She has a very reduced feeling of herself and a deep need for love and affection. She's a poetic soul, an old soul, and a dreamer. In this palm reading video, I'm going to be revealing everything that I see in her hands, how and why I see these things. But the one thing that really shocked me as soon as I saw her hands was this. I've seen these signs before in the hands of Jimin from BTS. The hand here on the right is Jimin's hand, and the hand on the left here is Rosé's from BLACKPINK. They're both their obviously right hands. And notice the second phalanx of Mercury, the Mercury finger, is enlarged on both. They both veer away very sort of hesitantly away from the rest of the fingers on the hand, as well as the two middle fingers doing the same thing at the tip as well. There are very similar psychological patterns here. They've both been through um, different things, but they have both been affected in a similar psychological way. In this video, I'm going to be comparing what I see in both hands, but primarily, this is a palm reading for Rosé from BLACKPINK. Let me know what your thoughts are, and please do subscribe. There is a great deal of water seen in her hand. Water is fluid, it is adaptive, it is very emotional, very creative, intelligent, and artistic. She is extremely introspective. The deep, long, and powerful thumb shows she's a deep thinker. The overall water in her hand shows that she feels so strongly about her emotions. She's constantly thinking and analyzing them. There is something of a mystery about her heart line. There appears to be either an overlap in the heart line itself, not a break, but an overlap. They're two very different things. Or maybe even something of an island. And this island resides underneath both Apollo and Saturn. It sort of looks in between an overlap and an island. And it does certainly look underneath Apollo. Now, I'm going to get to the bottom of what I believe this is. It's in both the left and the right hand, so it's fairly significant. But, whilst there are similarities between Jimin and Rosé, I'm just going to point out some of the differences first of all. And that is that Jimin is predominantly fire. They are both very sensitive, they're both very emotional, but the way in which they deal with their emotions is very different. They both have similar psychological um, patterns and I don't want to say conditions, but processes that they go through in terms of both having that great potential there for separation anxiety, abandonment issues, and as well as that, self-sabotage. Now, the reasons for this probably stem from similar reasons whilst when they were young. But the differences are the way in which they handle these, the way in which they express and process these. Now, uh, Jimin, being a fire hand, expresses these very outwardly. The moment that he is processing, he has an emotional response and expresses in the moment, very quickly adapting to his feelings and releasing. This is the heat seen in his hands. He's unable not to express in the moment what he's thinking and feeling. It just comes out. And he's also a much more physical person, which means that he is expressing his deeper, more complex emotions immediately and also through his ability to physically express himself either through um, dancing or martial arts. There's a great deal of physicality here, and this is a very healthy way of expressing his emotions. Now, it's very different for the water hand. The water hand is much more internal. There is, undercurrents. There's great swelling of emotions, very powerful, and it's much, much more difficult in a way, or at least the way in which the water hand expresses and deals with emotion is much more internal and expresses in a much more um, idealistic and conceptual, creative outlet and expression through, quite literally poetry or creating something that is artistic, writing lyrics, for example. Singing, that certainly applies to both and is both very from the soul, but also physical. It's kind of a combination of the two. And as well as that, just sort of creating artwork, actually just being very artistic. Water hands are much more prone to depression and poor mental health because a lot of what they think and feel is stored up within. They're internalizing, analyzing those thoughts, and find it very difficult to find a way to express and communicate those. Both Rosé and Jimin have a very short Jupiter finger, which means they have a very reduced sense of the self, very low self-esteem, very low self-worth. And this, combined with this separation anxiety, abandonment anxiety, uh, is compounded here because it means that they are likely to fall into that psychological pattern, both of them, of self-sabotage. Whenever something feels too Whenever something feels right and actually good and healthy in a relationship or in their working life, they find a way to disrupt and destroy it because it's not familiar, because it's unsettling, because what they are familiar with is things falling apart, are people leaving them, are actually the structure breaking down. That's what's familiar to them. And the familiar is providing security. So there's a catch-22. It's complete contradiction here. That is really, really sad. And I had similar feelings the moment I looked at Rosé's hands as I did when I looked at Ji Min's hands. I felt like actually really upset. Uh, I feel hurt when I look at her hands. I just want to hug her because I feel like there's so much hurt here. I feel unless she really understands and acknowledges what she's been through and how it's affected her, it's going to be very difficult for her to find and maintain those meaningful and loving relationships. And the same goes for Ji Min as well. They're both very different in how they express and process their feelings in the moment. Rosé stores it all in, and Ji Min fires it all back out again. But they are both very loving and sensitive souls. They are both very capable of love, to love and be loved. They are different in their love languages, ever so slightly, in that Jimin is more conventional, and requires more of a physical love language. He requires hugging and touching and likely PDA as well, whereas Rosé is far more idealistic, and what she requires is security through, in fact, pretty much every love language there is. Her love language is much more complicated, much more varied. What we see here in her heart line as it reaches up in between Saturn and Jupiter, showing that she has strong um, strong feelings of ethics and morality. It actually branches um, in something of a trident. It's very faint, but it's there. There are two forks here, and then there's a further fork right here. So this is providing us with a very um, varied understanding of love, and as a result, there's a varied need as well. So there are multiple love languages here that are both exhibited and required in all kinds of relationships. But what it also means, and what I really want to see for Rosé, is this heartline forking into something actually of trident, and really um, developing out and enhancing, because this means that she's going to be very successful and feel fulfillment in all areas of her life. And if this occurs for her, this trident will develop and strengthen on her hand. It's a very positive sign. It's probably the most um, ideal kind of heartline that we'd like to see. I would like to see this branching out further, um, and that would really provide us with the most ideal type of fulfillment and success in life. One of the things I have noticed about Rosé's hands is, and this is different to Jimin, the Saturn finger is actually quite long. Yes, Jupiter is short. Um, Apollo appears short. I mean, it's not all that short, but Saturn is long. Now, when you add this to the fact that she has a long palm as well, all the fingers are long, the headline itself is drooping thankfully not too low into Luna. I think with everything else that we've seen with this separation anxiety, abandonment anxiety, the reduced, intense reduced feelings of the self development here, the understanding of the self is strong, but the idea of what she is worth is quite low, which is really unfortunate, upsetting. When we combine all of these things here with what we see with the sheer length of Saturn, it produces a character that's a lot more kind of depressive and melancholic. And this again compounds that, enhances that propensity towards depression. She has um, this capability of getting inside her own head. She's highly introspective. She's very intelligent. You know, she's too often in her own head and needs actually someone to kind of bring her out of this state, um, and to just actually have fun, but in a very sort of healthy way with her, you know, in terms of, you know, who would be compatible and healthy for her in life as far as a relationship and friendships go. Rosé is something of a loner. I mean, a lone wolf. She enjoys her own company. Nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I think this is something of a defense mechanism, because of this abandonment issue. I think she's probably quite aware, as I mentioned, she's actually quite self-aware, that if she can be comfortable and happy in her own company, then she's safe. She doesn't need anyone else, and that, you know, that way she's not going to get hurt. And I think she has been hurt in the past, and that might be the reason for why we see this tremendous upset here. There it is, you know, and it's not strong. You know, it's really painful. This is the left hand, so it's showing everything that's internal, and it's affected her on the right hand quite physically as well. When you look at this image, it's a bit clearer. You can see something of an island here. You can see a line reaching down towards the headline. You can see an island on the lifeline. I know what this is. You can see the heartline reaching down, asking the mind for support from logic. She's feeling so hurt at the time, at this time of upheaval and trauma, that she's asking her mind, her logic, her heart is quite literally asking the brain for help here. That's, you know, it's almost like one organ, one third of her body is almost shut down, and is relying on the next most reliable organ for help at this time. That's how severe she was affected by this incident. And I suspect this is where and how and why we see these psychological issues crop up. As I say, I do know what this is, but I don't feel it's very helpful or fair to say what I feel this is exactly what this event is. But I can and will say that it was at the age of 18 this event happened, and you know, when the heartline reaches um, the headline, it's a clear sign of emotional shock and trauma, and it's very upsetting. And you know, when I saw it initially, when I saw this, I looked at the left and the right hand, and I thought, well, being that it's on the right hand, it's affected her physically. Maybe it could be an operation of some sort, an island, or at least that's what it looks like on the heartline underneath. Hollow is said to be a potential eye issue, maybe eye surgery, something like that. But then with everything else I've seen, I've kind of come back on this. This is much more internal as well. This is a very, um, this is affecting her in a very powerful way emotionally. This is much more than just some sort of operation. This event was both physically and emotionally impactive and shaped her psychology in the way that we see here, and is similar. The effects of which is similar to what we see in the hands of Jimin, except the reasons for why we see it in Jimin's hands are partly just his character, but also partly his upbringing as well. And if you want to know more about that, more about my analysis on Jimin's hands, please do check out my palm reading for Jimin. I have now read the hands of every member of BTS. Now, in Rosé's hands here, I see what essentially is She is just such a beautiful person. There's such um, a great deal of love and warmth here. And the right hand thumb, it's showing the eye of Ganesh here. This is said to be in Indian palmistry a sign of someone who was kind to animals in a past life, and as a result has a good amount of good karma in this life. You notice it very strongly and clearly on her left hand as well. This means that she's both a good person internally, externally. There's nothing really hidden here. There's no deception. There's no manipulation. She's just overall, from everything that I see in her hands, she's just a wonderful, lovely, loving person. A deeply human, actually something of a humanitarian. She's compassionate. She's caring, empathetic. She's understanding, highly emotionally intelligent as well. She is just a very nice, decent human being, and she has been a decent person in a past life and is in this life as well. And as a result, will carry that good karma over into her next life. Her previous life hangs heavy, weighs down, and she carries something of this in her life as well. And part of these reasons for the way in which she reacts and feels in her life is partly because of what she's carrying over from a previous life. And much as, it's the same for a lot of us, but in particular, it weighs down heavy on her because of the intensity of just how she feels and how she stores those emotions. And what she really needs to be aware of is how that affects her physically, how her psychology has an effect on her physiology. The two middle fingers leaning very sharply away from each other, particularly at the tip here, is showing me that she's very hesitant about working with others. She's something of a loner. It's not that because what I've noticed about her lifeline is that it actually just swings out quite boldly. She's very imaginative. She reaches towards um, unrealistic and kind of almost fantasy, creative. She's got very imaginative leanings in life in general. She's always going to explore all that is wonderful and inspiring and imaginative. She's just a very artistic and, as I say, a very poetic soul, and she's in search of all of these things that really inspire and resonate with her deep sense of creativity and imaginative leanings. But the two middle fingers here, they do show me that she is very hesitant about kind of working with others in a way, I think inherently, as well as in quite a developed way. And I think partly this is because of her previous experiences. She's something of a loner, something of a lone wolf. She actually works best alone. She's hesitant to work with others, but recognizes at the same time that that's probably what's best. And this is why the two fingers in the middle, they are together, then they veer away apart. She's hesitant about that. And I think she's probably very selective about who she works with and how. She's very superstitious and very, sensitive to a point where she's probably highly intuitive, but I do feel she's very trustworthy. I think that she is something of a confidant. I think that she could be relied on in times of, I think she would make a great counselor. I think she'd make a great therapist. This introspection, this high emotional intelligence, she's got such a great awareness of her own complex emotions that I think she has a great understanding of the human condition in itself. She would make a superb psychologist. And absolutely, what she's been through as well, in part, would really provide her with some of those tools, some of that insight that's really needed to um, actually put herself in other people's perspectives. There is something of a tendency, though, to lean towards unimaginative thoughts and thinking. This, thankfully, however, is negated somewhat by the actually fairly kind of rigid, hard angles we see in the palm altogether. This provides her with something of a practical approach to all problems in life, all situations. So while she's extremely creative and imaginative in her thinking, unrealistic in her thinking, in where her mind leans. um, and finds her. At the same time, she's very drawn to very practical solutions, and so in this way, she would really find herself if she wasn't in this life that she's living right now. She would make a superb doctor, therapist, counselor, psychologist, physiotherapist, occupational therapist. These are some really good career choices for her. You know, if I was to read her hand and I didn't know, um, I mean, I'd get a lot more from actual reading because I could see a lot more in the hands. I can tell people's life purpose and life lessons from their fingertips. I can see all sorts, but I need clarity to provide clarity. And unfortunately, with these Sunday case studies, they're so blurry, these images, but I'm doing the best I can. But if I were to see her hands in real life, just from what I see in these images alone, I would say that this is someone who would certainly benefit in some sort of medical, holistic healing field. She has the signs of someone who is would make an exceptional healer, someone who has just she's got so much to give. She's such a giving, healing, loving soul. And I think this is actually probably who she was in a previous life, something of this role. And this is probably where she's got her good karma from as well. Innately, this is just who she is. She's just very giving, very loving, and really wants to heal and give back to the world. Because of the lack of clarity that I have in these images, and these are the best I could find, it's not really all that possible for me to predict in terms of her fortune, her career, her destiny. But I do believe she will, I would say at the age of 45, there's something of a shift in her path and life, and I think she's going to launch a career. Um, it could be, let me just get the timing right. I'm going to say about the age of 40. It could be 40 to 45. She's going to launch, I believe, she's going to launch her own business. And I think it's going to be something like fashion. It's going to be something like this. It's going to be a clothing range, maybe. And I think she's going to be heavily invested in, the ideas around this. It's not just going to be her name stuck to something. I think she's actually really going to um, turn a corner in her career, in her path. I do believe she's going to do a lot of work for charity. There's a lot in her hand that says, she's got a lot of ideas about the changes she wants to make to her immediate world. And I think once she's gained a bit more, influence behind her, perhaps resources, she's probably going to put that to really good use. And I think she's going to do a lot of charity work. As I say, she's got a lot of love to give, a lot of healing to do, and in this way, she's healing herself as well. And this is a very healthy practice. At the same time, this Mercury finger leaning so drastically away from the rest of the fingers shows that she has actually a need for boundaries, for privacy, for respect, for these boundaries in working relationships, in friendships as well. So while she is working in quite a close unit with the other members of Blackpink, I think she also really needs her own alone time as well. I think this is something that she actually requires in order to express herself. She needs to express herself in isolation. It's just these little things to us that might seem small, but to her it is huge. It's like she'll go on a lunch break on her own, every day. These are things that she actually really needs. She needs consistent alone time. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is just something else around her psychology that I noticed that I hadn't already mentioned. I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of this video. But just to kind of summarize here, Rosé is an extremely old soul. She's been around many, many times before. Actually, like a lot of the other members in the K-pop industry that I've read the hands of recently, I'm seeing this actually time and time again. There's reasons as to why they've risen to heights they have in their lives that they're living right now, and it's partly because of what they've been through. It's partly because of this karmic design. It is, of course, destiny to some degree, but there's reasons as to how and why that's been shaped, and our previous lives have a lot to say around that. And she has been a wonderfully beautiful soul in a previous life, and what I mean by that is she's just been a good person. She's been giving and loving and healing towards others, and as a result, this is not she's not just a one-off. She's been this person for many lives, and kind of risen on that karmic ladder, if that makes sense. And those are my thoughts. She is a humanitarian, but she really requires privacy and a great need to heal herself as well. A lot like what we've seen in the hands of Jimin as well, except Jimin's path is very differently. He processes these things very, very differently, and he's on a very different path altogether. Please do let me know what your thoughts are on this reading. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed this video. There's many more videos I'm going to create. Next week, I'm going to do another member of Blackpink. I did Lita last week, and let me know who you'd like me to read the hands of next week for the two remaining members of Blackpink. And thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.